It begins not with a crash, but with a closing fist. June 1779. The Rock of Gibraltar, a limestone titan, bakes in the Mediterranean sun. Its sheer cliffs drop into the azure water, a fortress built by nature and perfected by man. For decades, it has been Britain's strategic key, the sentry box that unlocks the trade of the inland sea. But now, that key is in peril. From the land, on the narrow isthmus connecting the Rock to Spain, an army of 14,000 men begins the laborious process of digging. Trenches, parallels, and gun emplacements. They are sealing the landward gate. From the sea, the true scale of the challenge becomes clear. A forest of masts. The combined Bourbon fleet of France and Spain, nearly 50 ships of the line, forms a crescent of naval power that stretches from horizon to horizon. This is the fleet of Admiral Luis de Cordova y Cordova, and its mission is absolute. Nothing gets in, and nothing gets out. Inside the ramparts, the alarm is sounded. The British garrison, barely 5,382 men, stands to its posts. These are not elite guards. They are the workhorses of the British Empire. The 12th East Suffolk, the 39th East Middlesex, the 56th West Essex, and the 58th Rutlandshire regiments of foot. These redcoats are professionals, but they are profoundly outnumbered. With them stand their German allies, the Hanoverian regiments of Hardenberg, Raiden, and de la Motte, auxiliaries bound to the British crown. On the batteries, the men of the Royal Artillery and the Royal Engineers check their guns, knowing they are the Rock's first and last line of defence. At their head is a man forged for this very moment. General George Augustus Elliot, the Governor of Gibraltar. He is disciplined to the point of austerity, a vegetarian and a teetotaler, a man who believes in duty above all else. He surveys the enemy's preparations with a cold, professional eye. He knows the mathematics of the situation. He has too few men, too few supplies, and no immediate hope of relief. The civilian town at the foot of the Rock, filled with merchants, sailors, and the families of the soldiers, is already in a panic. Elliot's duty is not just to the fortress, but to them. He understands the enemy's strategy. It is simple. It is brutal. It is starvation. This conflict is not an isolated squabble. It is a world war. Britain's disastrous campaign in its American colonies, culminating in the shocking surrender at Saratoga, has torn its reputation of invincibility. France, sensing weakness, declared war in 1778, eager to strike at its old rival. Now, in 1779, Spain joins the fray. But for Spain, this is not about America. It is about Gibraltar. This siege is a matter of intense national pride, a crusade to reclaim the Rock that was captured by Britain in 1704 and has haunted the Spanish court for 75 years. The Bourbon plan is to win by attrition. The ships will block the sea, the army will block the land, and their cannons, from land and sea, will begin the slow, grinding process of reducing the fortress to rubble. The defenders are cut off. The first day of the siege passes, then the first week. The garrison waits. The world waits. This is the beginning of what will become the longest, most grueling siege in the history of the British Empire. 3 years, 7 months, and 12 days. A story of endurance, innovation, and terror set upon a 4-square-mile piece of rock that Britain, against all odds, refused to lose. The summer of 1779 bleeds into autumn, and the blockade tightens like a garrote. At first, the siege is a distant affair, a matter of mathematics and logistics. Admiral de Cordova's fleet is a permanent, menacing feature on the horizon. On land, the Spanish trenches inch closer, zigzagging across the sandy isthmus. The digging is relentless, punctuated by the sharp crack of British cannon fire as the Royal Artillery seeks to disrupt the work. The Spanish respond in kind. The air begins to fill with the sound of dueling artillery, a constant dull thunder that will become the soundtrack of life on the Rock. Stone splinters from the cliffs, and the civilian town, huddled at the base, suffers the first casualties. buildings are shattered, reduced to rubble. But the true enemy is not yet the cannonball. It is hunger. General Elliot, with grim foresight, takes immediate and drastic measures. He imposes strict rationing on all, soldier and civilian alike. There will be no special treatment. To prove his resolve, the governor famously restricts his own diet to just 4 pence a day, sharing the plight of his men. But his personal austerity cannot create food that isn't there. Gibraltar is a fortress, not a farm. It produces nothing. Every biscuit, every barrel of salt pork, every cask of powder must come from the sea. And the sea is closed. As winter approaches, the situation becomes desperate. The price of basic goods inflates to absurdity. A single loaf of bread, if one can be found, costs a soldier's weekly pay. The men, and particularly their families, begin to suffer. The first gnawing pains of starvation are followed by a more insidious killer: disease, scurvy. The scourge of the seas is just as deadly in a besieged fortress. Without fresh fruit and vegetables, the men's bodies betray them. Gums swell and blacken, teeth fall from their sockets. Old wounds, healed for years, mysteriously reopen. The men grow weak, their legs swelling, their bodies covered in painful sores. They become too feeble to stand watch, let alone drag a heavy cannon. The smell of the rock changes. It is no longer the clean scent of sea salt and sun-baked limestone. It is the sulphurous stench of gunpowder, the choking dust of pulverized stone, and the sour, pervasive odor of smallpox and scurvy. The civilian population, now living in crude tents and shelters on the safe side of the rock, away from the landward bombardment, is hit hardest. Elliot, ever the pragmatist, does what he can. He encourages the men to hunt for wild greens, for dandelions, for anything that might offer relief. His experiments have limited success. The men are dying, not with a musket in their hands, but in their hammocks. By the turn of the year, into 1780, the garrison is on the verge of collapse. The men are skeletons, ghosts in tattered red coats. They can barely muster the strength to man the guns. Elliot knows he cannot hold out. The rock is not being defeated by Spanish cannons, but by the slow, agonizing rot from within. Every day, lookouts scan the horizon, past the daunting silhouettes of the Bourbon fleet, praying for a sail. A British sail. Without relief, the siege will be over by spring. The mathematics are undeniable. But as the new year dawns, a new player is racing across the Atlantic, a man who will change the garrison's fate. Admiral Sir George Rodney is coming, and he is bringing a storm with him. In the dark, frigid waters of the Atlantic, Admiral Sir George Rodney sails for Gibraltar. He is a fighting admiral, aggressive and decisive, and he is leading a fleet not just of supply ships, but of powerful men of war. His mission is twofold: break the blockade and deliver the vital supplies, then sail on to relieve the West Indies. He is Britain's best hope. As he approaches the coast of Portugal in January 1780, his frigates spot enemy sails. It is a Spanish squadron, commanded by Admiral Juan de Langara, sent to intercept him. Langara, believing he faces only a small convoy, moves to attack. He has tragically miscalculated. Rodney gives the signal for a general chase. What follows is not a formal, stately battle of opposing lines, but a frantic and brutal pursuit that will last through the night. The British ships are faster, their hulls copper-sheathed, giving them a crucial advantage in speed. As dusk falls, the chase becomes a chaotic melee, illuminated only by the flash of cannon fire and the pale light of the moon. This will be remembered as the Moonlight Battle, or the Battle of Cape St. Vincent. One by one, Rodney's capital ships, heavy ships of the line, overtake the fleeing Spanish. The combat is relentless, ship to ship, broadside by thundering broadside. The Spanish flagship, the Santo Domingo, erupts in a catastrophic explosion, a terrifying fireball that lights up the night sky and rains debris for a mile in every direction, momentarily silencing the guns. The shock is profound. Other Spanish ships are pounded into submission. By the time the sun rises, Rodney's victory is complete. He has captured 4 Spanish ships of the line, including Langara's new flagship, and destroyed another. It is a devastating, humiliating blow to the Spanish Navy, and more importantly, the path to Gibraltar is now wide open. Back on the rock, the starving garrison hears the distant, echoing boom of cannon fire from the sea. Hope, a feeling long since extinguished, flickers. Then, the lookouts scream. Sails. Dozens of them. But these are not the familiar, dreaded silhouettes of the Bourbon fleet. These are British. The entire garrison, those who can stand, rushes to the ramparts. They watch in stunned silence as Rodney's triumphant fleet, towing its captured Spanish prizes, sails majestically into the bay. The blockade is broken. The starving men break down in tears. Their salvation has arrived. The relief is immediate and overwhelming. The transports are filled not just with powder and shot, but with food. Barrels of salt beef, casks of flour, and most precious of all, crates of fresh lemons. These lemons are more valuable than gold. They are the cure for the scurvy that has crippled the garrison. General Elliot oversees the unloading with meticulous care. The sick are tended to. The men eat their first full meal in months. The change is miraculous. Within weeks, the gaunt, skeletal figures begin to look like soldiers again. The scurvy recedes. Strength returns to their limbs. Rodney's arrival does more than just feed the garrison. It provides a massive boost in morale. He has not just slipped past the enemy, he has smashed him. He has proven that the Royal Navy still rules the waves. The victory at Cape St. Vincent sends a shockwave through the Bourbon alliance. Their blockade, so carefully maintained, has been shattered by a single, audacious stroke. Rodney, his primary mission accomplished, resupplies the fortress, leaves some reinforcements, and then sails west for the Caribbean. He leaves behind a garrison reborn, a fortress rearmed, and a governor, General Elliot, whose iron will has been vindicated. The siege is far from over. But the first round, the Battle of Starvation, has been decisively won by Britain. Admiral Rodney's sails disappear over the western horizon, and the siege resumes its grim rhythm. The Bourbon fleet, shamed but not destroyed, creeps back to its station. The blockade is re-established. The Spanish land army, frustrated but resolute, returns to its digging. The relief of 1780 was a reprieve, not a rescue. General Elliot knows this. The supplies will not last forever. The garrison is once again an island, a tiny red-coated enclave in a sea of enemies. The War of Starvation is back on, but this time it is a slower, more grinding affair. The year 1780 stretches into 1781. This is the long endurance. The daily reality for the garrison becomes a monotonous cycle of bombardment, repair, and rationing. The Spanish siege lines, the parallels, are a marvel of 18th century engineering. Thousands of men toil under the hot Spanish sun, digging trenches ever closer to the British walls, protected by massive earthworks. From these new lines, Spanish artillery begins a systematic, relentless bombardment. The civilian town, the once bustling port at the foot of the rock, is methodically erased. It is completely leveled, reduced to a moonscape of splintered timber and powdered stone. The civilians and soldiers' families are forced to huddle in crude tents and makeshift shelters on the leeward side of the rock, seeking any protection from the rain of iron. The sound is incessant. The deep boom of the Spanish siege mortars is answered by the sharp crack of the British guns. The air is permanently hazed with the sulphurous smell of gunpowder. Dust is everywhere, coating food, water, and uniforms. And death becomes routine. A soldier walking across a parade ground, a woman carrying water, both can be extinguished in an instant by a random shell. This is the psychological warfare of the long siege. It is designed to break the defender's will, to make them feel that there is no hope, no escape, only this constant terrifying noise and the slow depletion of their resources. But the British are not idle. General Elliot is a defender, but he is not passive. He understands that the rock itself is his greatest weapon. If the Spanish are digging towards him, he will dig into his fortress. He orders his Royal Engineers to begin one of the most ambitious engineering projects of the 18th century. Men, hard-bitten soldiers, are given picks and sledges. They begin to tunnel directly into the sheer solid limestone of the rock's northern face. This is back-breaking, perilous work. The objective is to create new artillery positions, galleries, that are completely immune to enemy fire. As they burrow deeper, they blast loopholes, or embrasures, through the vertical cliff face. Suddenly, the British have created a series of surprise gun platforms, hundreds of feet above the enemy. These new positions have a devastating, enfilading field of view, allowing them to fire down and along the Spanish trenches. The attackers, who believed themselves safe while digging, are now hideously exposed to fire from a direction they thought impossible. This innovation is a testament to British ingenuity, turning the fortress from a static wall into an active, multi-layered weapon. While the miners tunnel, another innovator is at work. Lieutenant George Kohler, a brilliant Royal Artillery engineer, tackles a different problem. The British cannons on their standard carriages cannot aim far enough down. The Spanish trenches, huddled at the very base of the rock, are in a dead zone, safe from the guns high above. Kohler, observing this flaw during the siege, designs a solution: the depressing carriage. This new mount uses a sliding mechanism and a screw, allowing a heavy cannon to be safely angled downwards at up to 70 degrees. Now, no part of the isthmus is safe. Kohler's invention means the British can drop cannonballs with pinpoint accuracy directly into the heads of the Spanish sappers. The rock is beginning to fight back in ways the attackers never anticipated. But even as these innovations give the defenders an edge, the Spanish are planning something new. Their trenches are now dangerously close. By autumn 1781, they are preparing for a massive assault. Elliot decides he will not wait to receive it. By late November 1781, the situation has reached a critical point. The Spanish siege lines are no longer a distant threat. They are a dagger pointed at the throat of the fortress. Through months of relentless digging, the attackers have advanced their parallels so far forward that they are now, in some places, dangerously close to the British walls. From these advanced positions, they are constructing massive new gun batteries, preparing for a bombardment of unprecedented scale. General Elliot, watching their progress, knows that to remain passive is to invite destruction. He cannot allow them to complete this work. He decides on a course of action that is as audacious as it is perilous: a sortie. This will not be a mere raid. It will be a major offensive, a calculated gamble to destroy the product of months of Spanish labour. The plan is meticulously crafted. On the night of November 26th, Elliot gives the order. In the pre-dawn darkness of November 27th, 1781, the gates of Gibraltar swing open. 2,500 men, nearly half of the entire effective garrison, march out into the no-man's land of the isthmus. They are organised into 3 columns. Their muskets are, by order, unloaded. This is not a firefight. This is a mission of destruction, to be carried out with the bayonet, the hatchet, and the explosive charge. The Spanish, secure in their overwhelming numbers and the supposed timidity of the starving garrison, are caught completely by surprise. The British storm into the trenches with a terrifying, disciplined fury. The Spanish sentries are overwhelmed, bayoneted before they can even raise the alarm. The Redcoats and their Hanoverian allies sweep through the siege works, a tide of vengeful ghosts. They are not here to fight the Spanish army. They are here to fight the Spanish works. The Royal Engineers and Royal Artillerymen, accompanying the infantry, get to their grim work. They carry flammable mixtures and explosives. They swarm over the new, nearly completed Spanish batteries. Teams of men use sledges and spikes to spike the heavy siege cannons, hammering soft iron spikes into the touch holes, rendering the massive guns useless. They plant charges in the powder magazines, light the fuses, and retreat. The work is fast, brutal, and ruthlessly efficient. They tear down wooden structures, set fire to fascines and gabions, and sabotage months of backbreaking engineering. The Spanish camp, now fully roused, descends into chaos. But it is too late. The British raiders are phantoms. Their work is done. Before the Spanish can organize a coherent counterattack, the signal is given. The British columns pull back, melting into the darkness as suddenly as they appeared, retreating to the safety of their walls. Behind them, the night sky ignites. A series of massive explosions rips through the advanced Spanish lines as the powder magazines detonate. The new batteries, the pride of the Spanish engineers, are reduced to a raging inferno. The garrison, watching from the ramparts, lets out a roar of triumph. The sortie is a stunning, unqualified success. At minimal cost to themselves, they have utterly wrecked the enemy's most advanced positions. They have not just spiked dozens of cannons and blown up vast stores of powder. They have inflicted a profound psychological blow. They have set back the Spanish timetable by months. General Elliot has proven that his starving garrison is not just a passive victim, it is a coiled viper, capable of striking with lethal force. The daring raid restores the garrison's morale and fills the Bourbon alliance with a new, grudging respect for the old general on the rock. But this humiliation will not be forgotten. It will only harden the resolve of Britain's enemies, who now begin to plan something far more terrible. The spectacular failure of the Spanish siege works, reduced to ash and twisted iron by Elliot's sortie, sends a shockwave of humiliation through the Bourbon command. For over 2 years, the combined might of Spain and France, two of the world's great powers, has been held at bay by a few thousand starving soldiers on a lump of rock. The siege is not just a military failure, it is a political embarrassment. The King of Spain, Charles III, is furious. The cost in gold, men, and national prestige is becoming unbearable. It is clear that the current strategy of blockade and bombardment is failing. General Elliot will not starve, and his guns are too well served. A new approach is needed. A final, decisive, overwhelming blow. In 1782, the Allied command is reshuffled. To deliver this final blow, the Allies turn to a man with a golden reputation, a proven winner. Louis de Balbes de Béthune de Crillon, the Duc de Crillon. He is a French general, but he is given supreme command of the combined Franco-Spanish land forces. His credentials are impeccable. He has just come from a stunning victory, having successfully captured the island of Minorca from the British. He is a man of action, an expert in siege warfare, and he arrives with a promise to the King of Spain. He will take Gibraltar. To fulfill this promise, the resources of 2 empires are placed at his command. The land army swells to a terrifying size. No longer a mere blockade force, it becomes a vast host of nearly 40,000 Spanish and French regulars, all massed on the narrow isthmus. The naval fleet, 50 ships of the line, is still on station. But Crillon knows that even with this overwhelming force, a frontal assault against the rock is suicide. The British guns, especially those in the new galleries, are too deadly. He needs a silver bullet. He needs a way to neutralize Elliot's artillery. That silver bullet is presented to him by a brilliant, obsessive French military engineer, the Chevalier d'Arçon. D'Arçon has designed what he, and all of the Bourbon command, believe to be the ultimate 18th century superweapon. They are floating batteries. But these are unlike any vessel ever built. They are not ships. They are mobile fortresses, engineered to be indestructible. D'Arçon takes 10 large vessels and radically rebuilds them. Their hulls are reinforced with 1-meter-thick layers of heavy timber, cork, and packed sand, a primitive form of laminate armor designed to absorb the shock of any cannonball. They are designed to be fireproof, the great terror of all wooden ships. Their topsides are covered with sloping roofs made of green, wet hides, intended to deflect incoming shot and extinguish any sparks that might land. But d'Arçon's true genius, he believes, is on the inside. He has engineered a complex internal water circulation system, a series of pumps and channels designed to constantly soak the wooden structures and immediately douse any fire that might miraculously start. These 10 batteries are, in theory, unsinkable and fireproof. These floating behemoths will be armed with 152 heavy cannons. The plan is simple. They will be towed into the bay and anchored just a few hundred yards off Gibraltar's main walls. From this range, they will be too close for the British guns in the high galleries to hit them effectively, but they will be perfectly placed to blast the British lower defences to pieces with a relentless, overwhelming bombardment. While these batteries soak up the British fire and smash the walls, the 40,000 troops on the isthmus will prepare to storm the breaches. The fleet will support from the bay. It is a massive, coordinated, combined arms assault designed to crush the rock from land and sea simultaneously. The Chevalier d'Arçon is so confident in his design that he stakes his reputation, even his life, on their invincibility. As the garrison watches through spyglasses, they see these strange, monstrous hulks taking shape in the Spanish harbour. The final terrible test is at hand. From the ramparts of Gibraltar, the British watch the enemy's preparations with a mixture of awe and dread. Through their spyglasses, they can see the unsinkable floating batteries. These 10 monstrous vessels, bristling with 152 heavy guns, are the talk of the garrison. They are a technological marvel, an enemy innovation that seems to checkmate every advantage the Rock possesses. The British have relied on their superior artillery and the protection of their stone walls, but d'Arçon's creation is designed to nullify both. The batteries will anchor so close that the high-angle guns in the new galleries will struggle to hit them, while their own fire, at point-blank range, will be devastating. The sloping, wet-hide roofs seem impervious to plunging shot, and the thick, layered hulls are designed to absorb everything else. General Elliot knows the mathematics of this new threat. He cannot trade broadsides with these floating fortresses. They carry too much metal, and his own lower-level walls cannot withstand such a concentrated, sustained pounding. The grand assault, when it comes, will be supported by 40,000 men on land and 50 ships of the line at sea. If those batteries are allowed to do their work, the Rock will fall. The garrison is no longer fighting starvation, it is fighting a superweapon. Elliot convenes his engineers and artillery officers. The central problem is not the batteries' guns, it is their hulls. They are fireproof. The entire Bourbon strategy relies on this one assumption. Elliot, the pragmatist, decides that this assumption must be tested. If they are fireproof, they must be made to burn. The British must fight wood with fire. The solution is an old and dangerous one. Red-hot shot. This is not a new invention. Naval ships have used it in rare, desperate encounters. But to use it from fortress walls, in a sustained defensive action, is a massive and hazardous undertaking. The concept is simple. A standard iron cannonball is placed in a special furnace, or grate, and heated until it glows cherry red. It is then carefully, and very quickly, loaded into a cannon and fired. The danger to the British gun crews is immense. The men of the Royal Artillery will be handling white-hot spheres of iron in close proximity to barrels of black powder. A moment's hesitation, a clumsy movement, could ignite a stray spark or the cannon's main charge prematurely, blowing the gun, the crew, and the battery to pieces. It requires a new level of discipline, a drill that is as terrifying as it is precise. But Elliot, trusting his men, gives the order. All along the ramparts facing the bay, the Royal Engineers construct special brick furnaces. Grates are installed. Stockpiles of coal and wood are prepared. The gun crews of the Royal Artillery begin to drill the perilous new technique. They learn to run the red-hot ball from the furnace, wrap it in a damp wad to prevent it from igniting the powder charge too soon, ram it home, and fire, all in a matter of seconds. This is Elliot's great gamble. He is betting that the Chevalier d'Arçon, in all his genius, has overlooked one crucial flaw. d'Arçon's pumps are designed to douse fires on the surface, or to quench flames started by conventional shot. Elliot is betting that a red-hot ball, fired with the full velocity of a cannon, will not be stopped by the wet hides. He is betting it will punch through the outer layers, and lodge itself deep inside the 1-meter thick timber and cork hull. There, buried in the dry, flammable core, it will act like a time bomb, starting a conflagration that no internal pump system can ever hope to reach. The tension on the rock is unbearable. The men watch the final preparations in the Spanish harbour. The furnaces are lit, their glow a series of sinister red eyes staring out into the bay. The British are ready. The Bourbon Alliance has its superweapon. General Elliot has his red-hot answer. September 13th, 1782. The day of the grand assault dawns. This is the climax of the siege, the moment for which the Bourbon Alliance has spent 3 years and a king's ransom. In the pre-dawn light, the garrison takes its positions. The air is unnervingly still. On the isthmus, 40,000 Spanish and French troops are arrayed in their trenches, a sea of bayonets glinting in the early sun. They are the landward fist, ready to storm the walls the moment the floating batteries create a breach. In the bay, the combined fleet of 50 ships of the line, under Admiral de Cordova, maneuvers into supporting positions, their gun ports open, ready to add their broadsides to the cacophony. Then, they come. Towed slowly, majestically into position, the 10 unsinkable floating batteries advance. They are monstrous, alien structures, low in the water, their sloping roofs gleaming wetly. They are under the personal command of their inventor, the Chevalier d'Arçon, who sails with them, supremely confident. The batteries anchor in a perfect line, a few hundred yards from the British walls, a position of such arrogance it takes the breath away. The Duc de Crillon, watching from the Spanish lines, gives the signal. Suddenly, the world explodes. The 152 heavy cannons of the floating batteries, the guns of the 40,000 men on the isthmus, and the broadsides of the 50 ships in the bay all open fire at once. It is a scene of infernal thunder, a bombardment beyond all description. Witnesses would later say the very rock itself shook. Over 400 pieces of artillery are firing simultaneously. The sound is a physical, crushing weight, a continuous roar that drowns out all human commands. The British lower walls begin to crumble under this relentless, point-blank pounding. The floating batteries are doing exactly what d'Arçon promised. They are systematically demolishing the defences. General Elliot, calm amidst the maelstrom, watches from his command post. His own guns are firing, but the conventional shot seems to have no effect. The cannonballs either bounce off the thick, angled hulls or splash harmlessly against the wet hides. The batteries, seemingly immune, pour a merciless, unceasing fire into the British positions. For hours, the garrison can do nothing but endure this punishment. The British gunners, their faces black with powder, sweat and bleed. But their solid shot is useless. The assault is working. The Spanish infantry on the isthmus begins to stir, anticipating the order to advance. But Elliot is waiting. He is letting the batteries anchor, letting them commit. He is waiting for his moment. Then, as the bombardment reaches its peak, he gives the command he has been holding in reserve. Heat the shot. All along the ramparts, the Royal Artillery crews run to the furnaces. The brick grates are already glowing. The perilous drill begins. Men with specialized tongs pull the cherry-red cannonballs from the coals, their heat a scorching wave. They are rushed to the guns. Load! The gun captains, with nerves of steel, oversee the careful ramming of the damp wad, then the hot shot itself. Fire! The cannons buck. The red-hot spheres hiss through the air, visible to the naked eye as deadly red comets arcing towards the floating batteries. The first shots strike. Many miss. Many glance off the sloping roofs, sizzling into the sea. But then one finds its mark, and another, and another. They do not bounce. They do not shatter. They punch through the outer hull, burying themselves deep within the 1-meter thick core of timber, sand, and cork. At first, nothing happens. The batteries continue their furious bombardment. The Chevalier d'Arçon, on board his flagship, must have felt a surge of triumph. His invention was working. It was invincible. He was wrong. Deep inside the hull of the Chevalier d'Arson's flagship, the glowing iron cannonball sits, buried in the dense layers of cork and dry timber. It is a cancer. On the gun deck, the French and Spanish crews, deafened by their own cannons, black with powder, have no idea it is there. They continue their disciplined, furious fire, cheering as they see the British walls crumble. For a few precious minutes, they believe they are invincible. Then a wisp of smoke, thin and acrid, curls up from a seam in the deck planks. Then another. The men at the internal pumps, d'Arson's innovation, rush to their stations. They pump water frantically into the circulation system. But the water is useless. It splashes against the inside of the hull, while the fire is burning within it. The red-hot shot is in a place no water can reach. The smoke thickens. The heat on the enclosed gun decks becomes unbearable. The men's confident cheers turn to nervous shouts. The pace of their firing slows. Panic begins to set in. They are trapped in a wooden box that is now, undeniably, on fire. And from the rock, the British Royal Artillery, seeing the first telltale signs of smoke, redoubles its efforts. The gunners, masters of their hellish new drill, fire with a cold, terrifying precision. More and more red comets hiss across the bay, punching into the hulls of the other 9 batteries. What began as a superweapon has become a death trap. One by one, the batteries begin to burn. The scene in the bay shifts from a battle to a massacre. The Bourbon sailors are faced with an impossible choice: stay on board and be roasted alive, or jump into the water and face the British cannon fire and the risk of drowning. Flames burst through the gun ports, silencing the heavy cannons. Masts, their rigging burned through, crash down onto the decks, crushing the men below. The sloping wet-hide roofs, designed to stop fires from above, now serve to trap the heat and smoke, turning the batteries into pressurized ovens. As night falls on September 13th, the Bay of Gibraltar is illuminated not by the moon, but by 10 blazing pyres. The unsinkable batteries are now 10 floating infernos. The sound of the bombardment has been replaced by the roaring of the flames, the cracking of massive timbers, and the desperate, agonizing screams of thousands of trapped men. The British, their work of destruction complete, cease firing the hot shot. General Elliot, a hard man but not a cruel one, orders his gunners to switch to cold shot, to fire near the burning hulks to speed their sinking and end the suffering of the men. British sailors in small gunboats even row out, at great risk to themselves, to pull their drowning enemies from the water. But the night's horror is not over. As the fires rage, they inevitably reach the powder magazines. One by one, the batteries detonate. Massive, catastrophic explosions rip through the night, sending towering columns of fire, timber, and bodies high into the air. The shockwaves are felt for miles. By the early hours of September 14th, the show is over. The invincible armada, the weapon that was to be the death of Gibraltar, is gone. The bay is a floating graveyard of charred, smoking debris and dying men. The grand assault has failed. It is the most catastrophic, decisive, and humiliating failure of the entire war for the Bourbon alliance. The Chevalier d'Arson has been rescued, a broken man, forced to watch his life's work become his life's shame. And the Duc de Crillon, on the shore, can only watch as his 40,000 men stand down, their path to the rock now and forever blocked. The sun rises on September 14th, 1782, to a scene of absolute devastation. The Bay of Gibraltar, which just one day before had held the pride of Bourbon engineering, is now a desolate morgue. The charred, blackened hulks of the 10 floating batteries litter the water, some sunk, some still smoking, all of them monuments to a catastrophic failure. The Spanish and French forces are in a state of collective shock. Their 40,000-man army, poised for a glorious victory, stands uselessly in its trenches. Their general, the Duc de Crillon, has seen his reputation for invincibility, earned at Minorca, shattered in a single night of fire and thunder. The Chevalier d'Arçon's superweapon has not just failed, it has been annihilated. On the rock, the mood is one of exhausted, grim triumph. The British garrison has survived the unendurable. They have faced the single greatest concentration of force thrown against any fortress in the 18th century, and they have won. The Royal Artillery gunners, their faces caked in sweat and black powder, their arms burned from the red-hot shot, have proven that ingenuity and iron discipline can defeat even the most terrifying technology. General Elliot's gamble has paid off in the most spectacular fashion imaginable. But the victory is not a happy one. The cost has been immense. The rock is battered. The town is a wasteland. And crucially, the siege is not technically over. The Bourbon fleet, though shamed, still commands the sea. The Spanish army, though demoralized, still occupies the isthmus. The garrison has won the battle, but it is still cut off. The long winter is approaching, and the supplies used to repel the grand assault have been vast. They need food, they need powder, they need men. They have proven they cannot be beaten by force, but they can still be starved. Unbeknownst to them, Britain has already acted. News of the massive Bourbon build-up for a final assault had reached London. The Crown, understanding this was the decisive moment, assembled one of the largest naval expeditions of the war. This was not a small, fast squadron like Rodney's. This was a massive convoy of 34 ships of the line, a fleet of frigates, and most importantly, dozens of transport ships packed with supplies, ammunition, and fresh troops. At its head is Admiral Richard Howe, a brilliant, taciturn, and deeply skilled naval commander. In October 1782, just 1 month after the garrison's miraculous survival, Howe's fleet appears on the horizon. For the Spanish Admiral de Cordova, this is the final, agonizing insult. His own fleet is larger, numerically superior to Howe's. He moves to intercept, to block this final relief and salvage some honor from the disaster. But Howe is a master of seamanship. He is not seeking a glorious battle. He is on a mission of logistics. He uses the weather, his superior signaling, and the skill of his captains to skillfully bypass the larger, clumsier Bourbon fleet. He shoulders his way past them, keeping his vulnerable transports protected in a dazzling display of naval maneuvering. He refuses to be drawn into a general action, his focus entirely on the rock. The garrison watches in disbelief as Howe's fleet, almost contemptuously, sails past the Spanish and anchors in the bay. The blockade is broken for the third and final time. The transports are unloaded. Food for months, barrels of powder, and fresh, healthy soldiers to man the walls. This is the death knell of the siege. The grand assault failed. The superweapon failed. And now, the blockade has failed. The Bourbon command, facing the combined humiliation of these failures, finally accepts the inevitable. The rock cannot be taken. The cost is too high, the prize impossible. The guns may not fall silent for a few more months, but the will of the attackers is irrevocably broken. The winter of 1782 descends into 1783, but the mood on the rock is no longer one of desperation. It is one of weary, iron-willed patience. Admiral Howe's fleet has come and gone, leaving the fortress stocked and its garrison reinforced. The fighting has not entirely stopped, but it has lost its fury. The Spanish guns still fire, but it is a spiteful, petulant bombardment, not the thunderous, systematic destruction of a real siege. The 40,000 men on the isthmus are a hollow threat, an army with no purpose, their great assault having failed in the most public and humiliating way possible. The great siege is over in all but name, ending not with a bang, but with a long, drawn-out sigh. Inside the battered fortress, the work of rebuilding begins. The civilian town is gone, a field of rubble that will have to be cleared and rebuilt from scratch. The garrison, though victorious, has paid an appalling price. The gravestones and mass pits tell the true story. Far more men died from the slow, agonizing grip of scurvy, smallpox, and starvation than were ever killed by enemy cannonballs. They have endured the unendurable. They have lived for over 3 years with the constant sound of cannon fire, the smell of gunpowder and disease, and the daily proximity of random, pointless death. They are survivors of a new kind of industrial warfare, a grinding, attritional meat grinder on a colossal scale. The man who held them together, General George Augustus Elliot, is now a living legend. He is the personification of the rock itself, stubborn, austere, unbreakable. His personal leadership, his insistence on sharing his men's plight by living on 4p a day, his brilliant and ruthless innovations, from the cola-depressing carriage to the devastating use of red-hot shot, have marked him as one of Britain's greatest fortress commanders. He did not just defend, he innovated. He did not just endure, he fought back, unleashing the sortie that crippled the enemy's confidence and the fiery salvo that destroyed their ultimate weapon. Then, in February 1783, the official news arrives. Diplomats in Paris had been hammering out a treaty to finally end the global conflagration that was the American War of Independence. The preliminary articles are signed, the war is over, the siege is formally, officially lifted. The date is February 7th, 1783, 3 years, 7 months, and 12 days after it began. The guns fall silent, and the silence, after so long, is deafening, almost unnerving. The gates to the isthmus, sealed for so long, are opened. In a strange, surreal postscript, the French Duc de Crillon, the general who had vowed to take the rock, asks to visit his victorious opponent. General Elliot, the consummate professional, agrees. He gives his former enemy a tour of the defences. He shows him the great siege tunnels, the galleries blasted from the sheer cliff face. He shows him the special furnaces for the red-hot shot. Crillon, a professional soldier, can only marvel at the ingenuity and the iron will that had defeated him. He has seen firsthand why his assault was doomed to fail. For Britain, the news of Gibraltar's survival is a desperately needed balm for a wounded national psyche. The nation has just suffered one of the most profound defeats in its history: the loss of its 13 American colonies. That loss is a humiliation that will redefine the empire. But in the smoke and fire of Gibraltar, a new myth is forged. The story of the Great Siege is not one of defeat, it is one of resilience, of the classic British bulldog spirit. It is a narrative of a few brave men, cut off and outnumbered, who, through sheer grit, refuse to surrender. Elliot and his garrison are feted as heroes, proof that Britain's martial spirit is not broken. For Spain, the result is an unmitigated disaster. They had entered the war with one primary objective: to reclaim Gibraltar. They had thrown the wealth of their empire and the flower of their army at it, and they had failed. The rock, more than ever, is a symbol of British defiance, a gateway to the Mediterranean that is now and forever secured. The Great Siege of Gibraltar was more than just a monumental feat of human endurance. It was a crucible of technological innovation, a brutal 3-year field test that forever changed the rules of siege warfare. The arms race between the attacker and the defender, between the Bourbon Alliance's overwhelming force and the British garrison's desperate ingenuity, forced both sides to create weapons and tactics that were decades ahead of their time. The most famous of these, of course, was the Chevalier d'Arçon's floating battery. It was, in its own way, a stroke of genius. It was the 18th century equivalent of a modern battleship or tank, a weapon system designed to combine overwhelming firepower with impenetrable armour. D'Arçon had correctly identified the central problem of siege warfare: how to bring massive cannons close to a fortress wall without them being destroyed by counterfire. His solution of 1-metre-thick laminate armour, sloping wet-hide deflectors, and internal water pumps was a brilliant, logical, and deeply innovative answer. The batteries were impervious to conventional shot. Their spectacular failure was not a failure of their primary design, but a failure to anticipate the next step in the arms race. D'Arçon had built a fireproof ship, but he had never considered the impact of a red-hot cannonball acting as an internal incendiary device, a weapon that didn't just break the armour, but bypassed it. On the British side, the innovation was born of sheer bloody necessity. The garrison did not have the luxury of empires. They had only a rock, a few thousand men, and a brilliant, stubborn governor. Their innovations were pragmatic, gritty, and deadly effective. The most significant was the red-hot shot. While not a new idea, its application at Gibraltar was revolutionary. General Elliot and his Royal Artillery officers turned a dangerous, niche naval tactic into a systematic, disciplined, and war-winning fortress defense. They industrialized it, building dozens of special furnaces, training crews in the perilous drill, and demonstrating that no wooden structure, no matter how well engineered, was safe from fire. This night of September 13, 1782, effectively sounded the death knell for the dominance of the wooden warship in fortress assault. Just as important, if less spectacular, were the engineering marvels inside the rock. The great siege tunnels, or galleries, were a testament to the sheer bloody-mindedness of the Royal Engineers. The idea of tunnelling into solid limestone, not for mining, but to create artillery positions, was audacious. It fundamentally changed the geometry of the battlefield. It allowed the British to fire down and along the Spanish lines from positions that were, for all intents and purposes, completely invulnerable. The Spanish could not destroy what they could not see, and they could not silence guns that were firing from loopholes blasted in a sheer cliff face. This three-dimensional defense turned the rock from a passive wall into an active, offensive weapon. And then there was the simple, elegant genius of Lieutenant George Kohler. His invention of the depressing carriage solved a problem that had plagued fortress defenders for centuries. Guns high on a wall could not hit the enemy at the base of that wall. This dead zone was where attackers, like the Spanish sappers, could work in relative safety. Kohler's new mount, with its simple screw and slide mechanism, allowed a heavy 24-pounder cannon to be aimed almost straight down. It was a precise, surgical tool that allowed the British gunners to drop cannonballs with pinpoint accuracy into the very trenches the Spanish believed were safe. This small, on-the-fly invention, born from direct observation of the battlefield, had an impact far greater than its size. It was a perfect example of the innovative spirit that defined the entire defense, a spirit that proved just as powerful as the 40,000 men and 50 ships of the Bourbon Alliance. The Great Siege of Gibraltar does not end as a mere footnote in a larger war. It becomes a legend, an epic that redefines the very meaning of the word fortress. In the immediate aftermath, as the smoke clears and the last Spanish ships sail away, the scale of what has transpired settles upon the world. The garrison, just over 5,000 men at the start, has withstood a combined enemy force that swelled to nearly 40,000. They have endured a blockade by 50 ships of the line. They have survived starvation, disease, and a constant 3-year bombardment that leveled their homes and shattered their walls. And they have faced a technological terror, a fleet of unsinkable superweapons, and sent them to the bottom of the bay in a single night of fire. The human cost is staggering, but not in the way a simple butcher's bill might suggest. While hundreds were killed by enemy fire, the true relentless reaper on the rock was disease. Scurvy, smallpox, and the simple grinding exhaustion of malnutrition claimed the vast majority of the victims. The victory belongs to the survivors, the men who learned to live on a daily biscuit, who saw their comrades' teeth fall out, and who still found the strength to man the guns and drill with red-hot iron. General George Augustus Elliot, the austere 65-year-old governor, is catapulted to the status of a national icon. He is the man who refused to lose. His image is everywhere in Britain, the stubborn, dutiful redcoat who, through personal discipline and brilliant innovation, held the line. He is raised to the peerage, becoming Lord Heathfield of Gibraltar, his name forever synonymous with the defence. The regiments that served under him, the 12th, 39th, 56th, and 58th of Foot, alongside the stalwart Hanoverians and the indispensable Royal Artillery and Engineers, are granted the unique battle honour of Gibraltar, their colours forever bearing the symbol of a castle and key. Strategically, the siege is a turning point. For Spain, it is a wound of profound national pride. They had entered the American War of Independence with one overriding goal: the recapture of Gibraltar. They had poured their treasury and their armies into the effort, only to be defeated in the most humiliating and public fashion. The rock, which had been a mere outpost, was now an unassailable symbol of British defiance, permanently lodged in the side of Spain. For Britain, the victory is a critical and desperately needed psychological triumph. It comes at the exact moment the nation is reeling from the loss of its American colonies. That defeat was a body blow, a sign that the First British Empire was crumbling. But the successful defense of Gibraltar is a powerful counter-narrative. It is a story of heroic endurance, of British grit, of naval supremacy, and of technological ingenuity. It proves to the world, and more importantly, to Britain itself, that the nation is not broken. It is a defiant roar in the face of defeat. The victory cements Britain's control of the gateway to the Mediterranean. This single strategic point will become the linchpin of British naval power for the next 2 centuries. It will be the vital base that allows Nelson to hunt the French fleet, the coaling station that fuels an empire, and the fortress that stands watch during 2 world wars. The Great Siege ensures that this key to the world remains firmly in British hands. And in the end, it is the symbol that endures. The siege transforms a simple, massive piece of limestone into an idea. As strong as the Rock of Gibraltar becomes a global phrase, a metaphor for ultimate reliability and unbreakable strength. It is a legend forged in sulfur, starvation, and fire, a testament to the 5,382 men who, for 3 years, 7 months, and 12 days, faced the combined might of 2 empires and did not flinch. Thank you for listening to our story. If you found this battle as fascinating as we did, please like this video and subscribe to British War History for more. We read all of your comments, so be sure to leave your thoughts below. We'll see you in the next video.